What's up guys, my name's Alka, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you the official roamer tier list. Now before I get into the tier list, I just want to say that this tier list is not made to show you which operator is just better than the ones below it, because there are operators in the S tier that are way worse than operators in the F tier, but they're better at roaming, right? So if you see me place Cav above like Maestro or Smoke, it's not that Cav is better, it's that she's better at roaming. So now that that's out the way, let's just get straight into the tier list. First of all, let's talk about Smoke and Mute. These are two F tier roamers, right? You need to be playing on site with these two. If you watch my anchor tier list, you know why. They're meant to be played on site. They're three armors with close range weapons that are meant to be played in the objective to slow down the attacker rush, and that is why they are not good at roaming, and they're in the F tier for now. Pulse, I'm going to put in the C tier. He is best played on or near site to get below nitros. There could be a case made for you playing below the site roaming to be able to kill people that are already in site, but that's implying that your anchors and your roamers didn't do their job properly, which is kind of a shitty thing to bank on. So I would personally just not do it unless you're playing consulate. Then you definitely could roam as him below and get some semi value out of him, but even then you're banking on your team losing, so I would not do that personally. I would play him insight. That's why he's in the C tier for the roamer tier list. Somebody like Castle, however, is an A tier roamer. Castle, in my opinion, is meant to be a roamer. Sure, you could put his castle barricades in or near the objective to get some semi value out of him, but I think they're probably just going to blow it up or melee them, to be honest, so you're not going to get much value out of playing Castle on the objective. But I will say, roaming with Castle and extending the site horizontally to make the site bigger, to establish more control over the map and make it harder for attackers to push, is how you should be playing Castle, and that's how people in Pro League, Challenger League, or just like in high ranks in general, that's how they play Castle. They just extend the site with him. So roaming with Castle is actually a great idea. Next, we have Doc and Rook, and I'm going to put them in the F tier for the exact same reason as each other, and that's that they're three armors who are meant to stay on site and use their scopes to have long angles into the objective. So Rook, you sit on site, you have a 2x, and you hold a long angle from the breach into where you are, and you get free kills. All of that to be said, their utility is meant to be played on site because they're three armors. Pretty self-explanatory there. And then we have Capcan. Capcan is a C tier roamer. I think that Capcan definitely needs to be anchoring on site. You put his Capcan traps way out of the way of the site, to be fair. Like, you put them not on site at all, but you don't play off of your Capcan traps. You have your Capcan traps off the site, they blow up, and then you finish them off when they come to the site with your gun or with your nitro cell. So anchoring is definitely the best move for him, and that is why he's not good as a roamer. He's also a 3 armor, which makes it a lot harder for him to roam silently and to leave high pressure situations fastly. So definitely does not belong in the roaming scenario at all. The same thing for Tachanka. Tachanka is not a good roamer. He's great for anchoring because of his utility and his 3 armor status. Vigil, however, I'm going to put in the S tier. Vigil is definitely meant to roam. All he does with his ability is make it to where drones can't spot him, and that's very good for the roam because it wastes even more time for them having to clear you out. If you don't know, as a roamer, your job is to waste time. It's not to get kills, it's to waste time as much as possible so that when they do eventually kill you, which is probably going to happen, or when you eventually do fall off, they have only like 30 seconds to a minute to get everything they need to done on the site and enter the site and plant the bomb. It's very hard to do if you're an effective roamer, and it's even harder to do if you're playing Vigil because they can't drone you out or use certain utility to be able to clear you out. So he definitely belongs in the S tier. I'm going to say that Solus is also an S tier roamer for the exact same reason, because you can use your utility to deny any sort of flank watch whatsoever. You can see zero cams watching the flank, you can see drones watching the flank, you can see nomad air jabs watching the flank and completely destroy them. You also are able to spot any attacker utility, so you can see where they're pushing from, where they're roam clearing from, etc., and be able to immediately shut it down. Also, Dokkaebi is kind of an S tier operator right now, and if they bring a Dokkaebi, you can see all of the attackers like you would be able to with Pulse because they have phones in their pocket, so that's actually a pretty good buff to Solus. And overall, she's just a great operator right now. She's great for the roam, and I think you should definitely pick her up if you're learning to roam effectively. Alibi, also an S tier roamer. Alibi is pretty much an S tier operator in general, maybe A tier now that they took her 1.5 times scope away, but honestly, like, she's really solid. Low recoil SMG, sight setup, deployable shield, a shitty ability, but the fact that her SMG is so good kind of makes up for it. And if you want to roam, she's actually really effective to do so, even though they took her 1.5 away, and I definitely recommend you still do it. She's on par definitely with Solus and Vigil in terms of how much you can get done roaming with her. Jaeger, however, is a B tier roamer. Now, contrary to what you might think, he does have a great gun, and you do put his utility on site in the prep phase, and then you can do whatever you want afterwards because you don't have to rely on actually like using his ability mid-round. So you can roam with him. He's actually not too bad of a roamer, but he's not too good of a roamer either. He's a 2-speed, not a 3-speed, and they nerfed his gun so many times that it's a lot safer to play on site and hold angles with and play off a shield with than it would be to roam with. His rifle is a bit hard to use on the roam compared to somebody like Alibi or compared to somebody like Vigil who have great weapons. You know, not too good, not too terrible either. He's just kind of mid in terms of anchoring and roaming. What I would do personally is lurk on or near site behind a deployable shield with your ADSs to get the most value out of him, and that's why he's in the B tier for roamers. Now, Bandit, I'm going to put in the C tier. So the reason I'm putting Bandit in the C tier is because Bandit is good for roaming. Like, you know, no doubt he's good for roaming because he's a 3-speed. He has a pretty okay SMG for the roam, but as Bandit right now, you are the best possible way to keep walls closed because of EMP grenades being in full effect. The only person that can counter that is Bandit because you can Bandit trick. And if you're Bandit tricking, that means you need to be on the sight wall, which means you need to be in sight, which means you're technically an anchorer, right? So even though he's a 3-speed and he has a good weapon, you need to be playing on sight with him to get the most value out of him. Sure, you could roam as him and still be effective, but I would definitely recommend anchoring as him, and that's why he's not so high on the roamer tier list. Next, I'm going to talk about Valkyrie. Valkyrie, I'm going to put in the B tier. I mean, you could roam as her, you could anchor as her, you could go either way. Doesn't really matter at all. She's better played on site. You play off of her cameras, you have pre-placed nitros, or you use her cameras to communicate to your actual roamers where they're coming from. Either way, roaming as her is not a good idea, not a bad idea. You can kind of pick which one you want to do, anchoring or roaming with her. Personally, I would lurk near sight and kind of pick the middle option, but you know, just kind of iffy. Same thing with Jaeger. That's kind of what the B tier is. You could kind of go either way with it. Doesn't really matter. Next, let's talk about Maestro and Echo. They're pretty much the same operator with a bit different gameplay styles. Echo is more aggressive, Maestro is more passive. Depends on what meta we're in. Either way, they're meant to sit on site and stay on their cams the entire round using their utility. Echo, you can get a bit more aggressive and actually get off of your cameras and kill people with his stuns. Either way, you're a 3 armor, you sit on site, you use your utility on site, and there's no reason for you to be roaming at all ever. I definitely do not recommend you roam with these operators, and that's why they're in the F tier for roamers. Now, I'm going to put Wamai and Legion in the C tier for the exact same reasons as each other, because they have a rechargeable ability. Because they have a rechargeable ability, that means that they need to stay alive the longest to be able to get the most amount of their utility possible. Because if they're staying alive the longest, they get more Wamai discs and more Legion devices. The position that stays alive the longest is anchorers, because they're pressured at the latest possible point in the round, because the roamers deal with the gunfights first, right? So being able to get the most utility out of them, you have to be anchoring with them. Now, I'm not saying you can't roam as Wamai or roam as Legion. You're just probably not going to live the longest as possible and get the most out of your utility than you would if you were anchoring on site and playing it safe. That's why they're in the C tier for me. You know, they're not worse than, like, let's say any of the operators up here, and you know, Vigil is definitely not better than Smoke or Mute for that matter. These two are actually S tier operators, but for roaming specifically, they're just not good roamers. Next, we can talk about Clash. Clash is a B tier roamer. Now, I will say, I talked about this in my anchor video, which is literally just this, but kind of flipped. But Clash, I actually think is meant to roam more than she is meant to stay on site. If you want to stay on site and have a shield that you can play off of that also provides information, just bring an operator with a deployable shield that also brings other utility. But with Clash, you want to be playing near site, right? So great example, Cafe. If you're sitting inside of Bakery as Clash, that is a lot more value that you'll get out of her than just playing in sight, zapping people, right? So you need to be playing her like Monty, where you're playing aggressively and you're holding space, than just like sitting in sight not doing anything, right? So I definitely recommend that you actually step outside of your comfort zone and play more around the map than you would inside the objective. That being said, that's why she's not in the C or F tier. You could still play her on site, which is why she's in the B tier, and she's definitely not as good for roaming as people in the S or A tier. That being said, I'm just going to put her in the B tier for now. Next, we have Frost. Frost I'm also going to put in the C tier. Frost is very good for anchoring. You could play off-site with her, but she is kind of bulky. She's a 2-speed, 2 armor. Her utility is best set on site because she has a deployable shield she can play off of, and her frost mats are best near or in the objective, so you need to be able to play off of those and get the free kills that they provide. So I definitely recommend anchoring with her. Could you roam as her? Sure. Could you roam as any fucking operator in the game? Sure, but you just kind of shouldn't with her, and that's why she's going in the C tier. Next is Cav. Cav is an uncontested S tier. I don't think you really even need to make a point for that. Cav is by no means a good operator. In fact, she's probably one of the worst operators in the entire game, but for roaming, she's great if you can use her effectively, which is typically only in the lower ranks, unfortunately, but she actually is a pretty good roamer. She's definitely not a good anchor, right? So she's not in the F tier, but you know, she's best suited to roam. That's what she's meant to do. She's meant to sneak around, flank people, stuff like that. She's just a worse version of Solus and brings absolutely no utility other than her interrogations, which you have to get very lucky to be able to pull off. Next, we have Mira. Mira is meant to be on site. She's meant to use her utility on site and play off of that utility. She's definitely an F tier roamer for that reason. She's also a 3 armor, so you need to be playing on site with her to be effective. Same thing with Smoke and Mute, so that's why she's going in the F tier. Another example of this is, let's say, Warden. Warden, you're meant to play on site as him. He's a 3 armor. If you play on site, you deny flash grenades, you deny smoke plants, you're going to get the most value out of him. He also has a deployable shield that's meant to be played on site, so definitely recommend that you do not roam as either of these operators. Next is Cade. Cade I'm going to put in the C tier. I probably honestly could put him in the F, but there is something to be said about being able to play near site and not necessarily on site as Cade, because he does have a pretty good weapon selection selection. If you're on console, probably not, but on PC, you can actually use his weapons pretty effectively. Also, there are some walls that need to be gotten that are not on the site. So, you know, same thing as Bandit. You could roam as him. Don't really recommend it. Meant to be played as an anchor, but not F tier compared to somebody like, you know, Mira or Warden, where you have to play them on site. Next, let's talk about Mozzie. Mozzie is definitely in the A tier. There is something to be said about being able to like play him in sight, to be able to have actual cameras to help your team out. He's not meant to be like a super deep roamer like Vigil or Solus or Alibi. Like, you can lurk near sight because you still want to be giving drone denial to your team. Now, you honestly, you could roam very far off site too with him. That's why I'm not putting him like in the B tier. He's still a great roamer. There are just people that roam better and easier to roam with than Mozzie. You know, I could put him in the S. I probably should. He is a great roamer, but you know, there's people that could be better, and I don't want too many people in the S tier, so I'll put him in A for now. Ella, same thing. You could roam with her very effectively. Also, if you watch my anchor tier list, you could anchor with her really effectively. If you play behind her shield with stuns all around you and you play with her shotgun, you could solo hold a fucking site. Her shotgun is that good, and her utility with the shotgun and the deployable shield is very strong. But you know, you have her SMG, you have stuns that you can have information for on the roam. Her SMG is like just really good if you know how to control it. So you know, could still be a very good roamer, and that's why I'm gonna put her in the A tier. Next, let's talk about Oryx. Oryx is again an S tier roamer. So as like, obviously you can't play him on site because his whole thing is he dashes around the map super fast and he can jump up hatches, right? That being said, you jump up hatches to be able to flank people or to be able to get back into sight once you're done roaming. Keyword roaming. He's meant to roam. If you stay on site with him, you're wasting the potential of being able to zip around the map super fast and being able to flank people who aren't expecting you to be on the opposite side of the map in 2 seconds, right? So he has his place, especially on maps like Consulate or like Chalet, where there's hatches and flanks that you can just zip to. So, you know, good at roaming. Not necessarily a good operator, kind of like Cav, but definitely should not be anchoring with him at all. Next, we can talk about Thunderbird. Thunderbird, I'm probably going to put in the B tier because it's kind of like Jaeger or Valkyrie, where you could kind of roam, you could kind of anchor, because you have the Thunderbird trick where you just take away the Thunderbird and you put it back on to be able to like recharge the heals faster, and then you just get infinite heals while playing on site. She also only has the 1x scopes, meaning that she can really only take medium to close range gunfights, making it easier for you to anchor, but also she's good at roaming. You can run around, you can save a heal station for your roam if you want to roam in a very specific place. She has great gun selection as well, right? The spear, so you could roam as her, you could anchor as her. Either way, doesn't really matter. I'm by no means saying she's a mid operator. On console, she's definitely S tier. On PC, she is a mid operator, unfortunately, but you know, it could kind of go either way. Same thing with Goyo, could kind of go either way. You honestly probably should just lurk near site or just be on site with him. So for that reason, I might put him in the C tier, but you could still roam as him, right? Because you put all of his utility down in the prep phase, meaning you can do whatever the fuck you want afterwards, because your teammates can probably still shoot the Goyos just as much as you can. Same with Jaeger, right? You put all of his stuff down in the prep phase and do what you want. So either way, could roam, could anchor, doesn't really matter. Melusi, F tier for sure, because now she's a 3 armor, and you use her utility on site anyways. Before they even nerfed her, you put her utility on site because it made it easier for your anchors to be able to actually split on the attacker rush. We are in a rush gun skill heavy meta, so she's actually really good right now. Now she's a 3 armor, so you have to anchor as her, and she only has 1-time sights, meaning she can only take medium to close range gunfights, meaning she's good at anchoring, but not good at roaming, and that's why she's in the F tier. Next, I'm gonna talk about Thorn. Thorn, honestly, I'm probably gonna put in the C tier. I think Thorn is way better at anchoring than she is at roaming. You could kind of go either way with her, but think about how her traps work, right? Her traps are best suited on site. She has a deployable shield. She only has 1-time sights. So if you anchor with her, she'll be actually pretty good, especially because she can make sight setup with her 50 cal SMG. But other than that, like, roaming with her is not too good because her SMG is not all that good, to be honest. If she had a 1.5, I definitely recommend roaming with her, but she doesn't. And most of her utility is sight oriented, so she's not really a good operator at all. But if you're gonna play her, don't roam with her. And then we have our last 2 operators, which are both going to be in the F tier. That is Aruni and that is Azami. Now these are both great anchorers. They're probably S tier anchorers, some of the best operators in the entire game, paralleled to Smoke and Mute. And for that reason, they're meant to play on site. Again, Azami, rechargeable ability. That means you need to be staying alive as her most of the time. Her ability is also just kind of a glorified deployable shield. And as you know, deployable shields are meant to be played on site, meaning that she is meant to be an anchorer. Aruni, also, you put her utility on site, you have sight set up, and they just made her a 3 armor, meaning that she kind of has to stay on site. She has pretty good weapons overall, but if you're using a DMR, that's even more reason to stay on site because you can't really roam with that gun. I mean, you can, like, it's a good gun, but if you're on console or you just don't have the best aim, I definitely recommend you anchor as her. And she's a 3 armor, so like there's just no reason to roam with her at all. But that's pretty much for the entire tier list. This is a pretty unconventional tier list. Like, you never see Cav in the S tier when you see Smoke in the F tier. Like, very weird. Keep in mind, it's not which operator is better than the other, it's which is better at roaming and which is worse and is meant to be an anchor, right? So just keep that in mind. Have an open mind when you look at the tier list. If you want to get better at the game of Rainbow Six Siege, I also have educational content. I post 4 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So sub the channel down below if you want to get better at the game. And like the video if you liked it. My name's Alka. I'm sorry if I sound like a crackhead because I'm talking super fast. I just took a monster and pre-workout and just went to the gym. I also have allergies, so I'm trying not to talk too slow to where you hear my nasally ass voice. Anyways, later.